Hi, welcome to today's Admin Chat. My name is Kemetia Foley, CAP, and it is my pleasure to be invited by Executive Secretary Magazine, Lucy Brazier and her team at Margin Publishing to do today's presentation regarding annual performance reviews and how they will change during this pandemic year. And it's obviously a sensitive subject, so let's start off with the obvious, which is there are a great number of administrative professionals and executive support professionals, management team partners that are either furloughed or have lost their positions due to the global downturn, both either because of COVID or other circumstances that have led for massive layoffs and furloughs. So this is not to be glib about the fact that folks don't have positions and are trying to talk about annual reviews when they don't have a job. There's a secondary purpose to this admin chat, which is very simply, even if you're not currently employed, which I was not between January and, I actually was pretty much out of work as an administrative professional. I did some contract work up and through about a month ago when I finally got back into an office manager position. So trust me when I say this is going to be helpful either in a job search or in a networking capacity or keeping track, so that hopefully whether you're going out on your own or you are transitioning to a different position, some of these things that we're going to talk about are going to be applicable, and I hope that you will still listen and join us for this chat today. Now, let's start with taking some very traditional approaches to what annual performance reviews look like. And there are two major kinds, and we're going to go off the basis of a typical calendar year of January through December. And in most cases, organizations would have already sent out to their staff a self-evaluation based on whatever form or structure that they have for you to comment on your progress on goals, any new professional development courses you've taken, things that you're interested in moving forward, things that didn't work out so well. If you had to address any kind of performance gap, what you did to do for that. But a lot of, and then you have the other kind of organization. So the other kind of evaluation is what they call a 360. There are many forms of annual performance reviews, but we're going to talk about these two in particular today. And we're going to talk about the three ways it's really impacted by what has happened since March, since the pandemic really came into full force across the globe. So in a 360 review, generally speaking, you have an opportunity to not only put your own opinion in, your own documentation in about your performance, but there's usually a team of people, 4 or 5, that you can ask to, in coordination with your supervisor or supervisors, to comment on your performance, how you've managed projects, how you've met your goals, what your customer service approach is, how you work as a team player. All of those things are whatever criteria your organization is measuring against in that 360, and it allows the organization to get a better viewpoint, perspective on the work that you do. Now, it was very trendy in the early 90s to do 360 reviews, and there's still a large chunk of businesses that do that, but I think even more now will approach annual reviews in this fashion because of the change in how we work together and how we communicate, and it's just been a fascinating research project to look into this very topic for you guys. So how's this going to change, first of all? As I said, if we're going from a January to a December program year, we're going to look at The companies have moved off that date. Either they have postponed doing your self-evaluation, or they've completely wiped it out. They're just saying, we're not going to bother. Or they're going ahead and saying, we're going to do this evaluation process as time permits, as our organization struggles or doesn't struggle, because some organizations are not struggling. Hard to imagine, but you can't put a negative on the whole thing because we don't have a clear purview of how all organizations are handling this. I can only go off the research that we've got. So they're saying, we're going to do this evaluation, but in terms of any kind of promotions or changes in salary structure, whether it is having to take a pay cut or getting a pay increase, we're going to postpone that for an additional amount of time until we have a better handle on the structure of our organization or the economy moving forward. And in all hopes, hopefully HR in your organization is clearly communicating what is going on. Here's the caveat. Please remember that all of your peers, including those that are in the HR office, your supervisors, all the way up to the board, they're all having this very stressful attempt to keep business practices, what they called sustainability for the organization, organizational sustainability and stability. And it could be that annual reviews are the last thing that they want to deal with, or they're absolutely adamant about keeping their talent in-house and not losing people that they don't want to lose, and they're going to keep communicating clearly what they need from you, what they want from you, what the expectations are. So the first thing you're going to look at in terms of how it may have changed is timing. The timing is going to change. Perhaps the urgency of getting things done before a certain budgetary meeting may or may not exist. So being flexible about those things. And somebody said, how do I ask, are we having annual reviews if I have not heard anything? This is a great question, right? So hopefully you have a wonderful working rapport with your supervisor or supervisors, or your team partner, your management partner, your team as a whole, whichever terminology you wish to use or which is appropriate for your position. I have always used the word supervisor because that's the person who's signing off on my timesheet, my project completion, my reviews. So I've always used that term, even though I do consider myself to be an equal peer part of the team. So when we're looking at that, if you have a great rapport with them and you have an opportunity to ask them to stay on the line after a Zoom call or scheduling, hopefully you're scheduling things so you can schedule yourself in. And we thought it was hard to schedule ourselves in when we were in the office and trying to get time. This is exponential. But I think depending on what methodology of communication works best between you and your team or your supervisor or the person you want to ask this question to, you can always use that relationship appropriately and say, hey, I am just wondering what am I going to be evaluated on this year, if anything. Notice I didn't say, are we having annual reviews? Are we having a performance review? I would not approach it that way. I would suggest approaching based on what you already had going into this year. So if in April it was part of your review process that you needed to complete additional project management course in Trello or some other tool that your organization has assigned for you to meet that goal, and you have other goals in terms of turning around budget processes or setting up procedures or onboarding so many people or transitioning, inventory for new laptops or new cell phones, whatever those goals were, it's perfectly legitimate to try to get a sense from that team and for your leadership to say, hey, can you tell me, am I still supposed to be pursuing the goals? Are these goals still, the timeline for them still valid, or are we kind of playing it by ear? You want to give them the flexibility that you would wish for, because, I mean, I think everybody is zoomed out, or, video call, and the volume of email and channel conversations and Teams, it's just a lot for everyone, for everybody. So when you approach it as a question, as you are letting them know that you are aware that the company had goals for not only you but your entire team this year, you can ask, have our strategic goals changed? Are they changing? Is my specific are my responsibilities still going to be pegged to these things from December 22nd, 2019 for the year 2020? And most likely you may get an answer that says, I have absolutely no idea. Unless your organization is incredibly organized and is on it, which wouldn't that be lovely if all of ours were, and they could say to you, yes, and HR is going to be coming out with an update on what is going on with performance reviews or annual reviews, and you and I probably need to have a conversation about our one-on-one meetings. You are then establishing that those targets may have moved. They may be no longer a priority whatsoever, especially if they involved certain travel or meetings and events that are totally on hold until organizations have a sense of how they're going to move forward. Or if you've had to change priorities, which most of us have, in terms of ramping up online events and working with your meetings folks or doing it all on your own, then you want to make sure that you are clear, like, I see this is coming. We don't know what's going on with this yet, and have that conversation with your team, or bring it up in an appropriate team meeting forum, whether it's either publicly or in a chat channel, on a project channel, whatever methodology will work for you. But it's perfectly important and right for you to find out what you're going to be evaluated on. And even if that should mean that later on there's a reorganization and you're part of a team that's furloughed, you will have down in your history, your work history, your own knowledge of how this impacted your ability to change and turn and take care of new priorities and set others aside, which is a skill and a conversation that almost every single interviewer, prospective employer is going to want to have when they meet with you. Tell me about some challenges you faced during the pandemic in your organization, and one specific one, and how you addressed it. You know it's coming, right? And it may still even be in something that a lot of our supervisors or management partners don't know everything that we do every single day. They just know we keep everything moving. So having that already in your repertoire of conversation with them, ready to go, will help them make those measurements and let you know whether that's something you need to worry about. It will also help you if that layer of team management that you report to is dismissed or furloughed. You're still going to need to be able to document everything that you've done and how you've adopted a plan for yourself and how you've handled this and how you have worked with others. Key key factor here. You're going to have to rely on your team, the other team people you work with, your customers, to let your company know your value and back you up on it, because nobody is thinking about everyone's human. They're thinking about, okay, what am I going to do now? I have to make sure I'm providing value to the job. I need to keep my position. I need to keep contributing. So they're not necessarily thinking about others on the team. Not all people's, but some are that way. So we're talking about the timing. And then the second thing, of course, being talking about what you're being evaluated on. Now let's take the premise that your organization is set up a new conversation about this. They are going to move forward with evaluations, and they're going to change the format. So that's the second change. You're going to have a calendar change and a format change. These are two possibilities, or you can have a combination of both. And the format change could be, again, the criteria documentation that you're being evaluated on, who is doing the evaluating, right? The type of evaluation, whether it's like the standard self-evaluation, then your management partner weighs in on it, you guys have a one-on-one conversation, and it gets booted up the stairs and then put into the general pool of, promotions, ratings, pay increases, all of job title changes, all of those things. Or it's going to move to potentially that 360 review process, which means you're going to need to have in your head as you're working through this. And a lot of it may be last minute, right? The organization, we still have to do this. And it's got pushed and pushed, and now they have to deal with it. They have to do it. But 360, you're going to need to have in your mind already a suggested list of people that you would like to participate in giving comment and feedback on your work. You want to make sure that, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, you want to make sure they know exactly your skill set and the project that you have worked on with them directly. So that's key. The third thing is in terms of format. So we talked about the one-on-one format, the second piece being the 360, and the third format, which is really interesting, and I was researching this topic both through Harvard Business Review, the Society for Human Resource Management, talking about organizations doing away with annual reviews altogether and moving towards a more consistent and increased amount of check-ins with your team lead, your management partner. What they hope that will accomplish is, instead of being rated, which can have a negative connotation, it is more about that direct parallel conversation of, hey, this is what's working, this is what our priorities are, and are you aware that this is changing? And then the modification can come directly in real time, immediately, rather than waiting 6 months or quarterly or at the end of the year to let you know what adjustments need to be made in performance and skills that need to be ramped up or picked up and things that can't be set aside. So 3 ways that annual review can change. We were talking about either the one-on-one, it could go back to a 360 performance evaluation, or it could go to that regularly scheduled, no formal evaluation at the end of the year, but a regularly scheduled one-on-one check-in on priorities and goals with your supervisor on a very regular basis, so that those adjustments can be made on a regular basis. And I think my hunch, and I didn't get a chance to do a little bit more insight on this, but I'm sure you guys will chime in, as you often do, that more and more companies are going to this because it saves a tremendous amount of hassle for them. If they're doing constant check-ins, not constant, but consistently. So if it's once a month, hey, these are the priorities we talked about. Where are we on these? These are going away. I'm sorry, we have another change. So when you're making those constant changes, you're having that dialogue at the same time, and it's not a surprise to it's supposed to be not a surprise to anyone. And it also allows you to address issues right away, your questions, your concerns, anything that you think that they're not seeing, that we see, which happens a great deal, right? We're kind of the eyes and ears of our company, even when we're not in the office. We can pick up on some things. So this is really a good thing to think about. Now, how else can these performance evaluations or annual reviews change because of the pandemic? You're going to have almost a split year. So if your company we're going from the January to December purview, right? That's the example we're using. You can have January to March, maybe mid-March, end of March, which is going to be focused on, and please tell me you were documenting everything that was going on, even as crazy as it was. I heard some amazing stories, but make sure you have that what you were working on January to March, and then be able to document how that changed and how fast it changed and how many pieces of your priority shifted. That thing that people say pivot, but seriously, where did your role contribute the best and most important value, and how did it change? Can you tell that story? Can you tell that story in writing or in a document, or when you have the opportunity to meet one-on-one with your team leader? How many of us had colleagues or even ourselves who had to all of a sudden bring everybody onto Teams, had to learn Teams and teach it at the same time, set up structures, set up channels, permissions, all the permission structures that go with that, the versions that go with that, explain to our boss that we can't answer on their behalf. But that was a big thing that happened when it didn't have an opportunity to have enough people on the video calls, and you had to juggle that until you could get enough people on the video calls, or you had to use a different platform. All of those pieces are integral to the sustainability of your organization. Continuity of government is an expression we hear a lot in Washington, D.C. So the continuity of keeping things moving, because you have all these processes and procedures in place in case of. So now what you have is the continuity of keeping all of these things in place for your company, your organization. And I'm sure that they have some plans in place, but the executive assistants, the management team partners, the management assistants, all those key people who have had to really jump in and go above and beyond to keep this organization moving forward through and keep projects moving at the same time. Did you log extra hours? Did you keep track of them? Did you keep track of any kudos that you got from people for pitching in? Any of those emails, any of that documentation, you definitely want to keep, right? Because when you have an opportunity to share your successes, you want to have them ready to go. And you want to have them ready to go whether you're at your organization, you are being moved into a different team within your organization, and or you are moving to a new company, or after a while looking for employment. So those are still important, whether you are having a formal review this coming December or not. You still need to document everything that you have accomplished. Even if you are like, I cannot write down one more thing, I cannot track one more project, I'm sure that you guys are, because I don't know any admins that don't keep a massive Excel spreadsheet of everything going all the time, or some form, a Trello, Asana, whatever project management tool you're using, OneNote, whatever you're using. I am sure that you guys have already been thinking about this, but it's just even more important now because nobody can pay attention. Everybody is treading water and moving at 100 miles an hour to do so. And it's hard to focus when all that's going on. So we talked about the timing of performance reviews, and we talked about the type that you might be seeing. So addressing that, you can have a split year perhaps, and you're going to talk about what you accomplished January through maybe the end of March, and then March through, now I'm in August. It's like exponential amount of work and hours. So it will reflect it. And then the next thing you need to talk about is who are your allies and conversationally who could support you through not only your team, like your admin team, your external peers, your resource network that you've used. How can they help you? How can they help you prepare better for making your case or stating all the things that you've accomplished? Inevitably, you've put in some classes online together or some webinars. Perhaps you reached out to them for a resource for a large event, conferencing, streaming. Any kind of resource you've used externally, perhaps that's somebody you want to ask to be in your 360 review. If your company allows you to have somebody outside the organization. Not all companies do, so keep that in mind. I was going to talk about the 360 review for just a minute before we go on to the next part of the webinar, or the admin chat. It is really hot and humid here in Maine. It's really unusual this time of year. 360 reviews. Think of 360 reviews like almost a parallel to LinkedIn. If you're thinking about endorsements versus recommendations, and if you know the importance of the change, recommendations need to come from somebody who has worked directly with you on a project. Recommendations are nice to have, like personal references. People say, I worked with Kemetia, she's got a great sense of humor, ha ha ha, she's great. But it doesn't do me any good in a job environment, job search environment, or a review environment if it's someone who has not worked directly with me on a team project or something that my boss has tasked me to do, my management partner, my CEO, the CFO, whatever, other job duties assigned that I've been pulled off onto. I want to make sure that that person I'm asking to be part of that 360 review process is someone who knows my work quality. Think about that. And the second piece that's really important to that is you may want to consider how that person is regarded within the organization. Do they have a positive reputation? Now, you may work great with someone, and it's totally a personal decision. It's up to you and the person on your team who allows you to pick, if they, pick who is on your 360, or if you get to contribute, if you get to select. Make sure it's somebody who has a stellar reputation within the organization. The last the thing that could really take you off your progress is to have someone who isn't considered a team player, who isn't considered to be a good contributor, a positive contributor, a person who is complaining all the time. You don't want that person on your 360 review team. What you want is somebody who is preferably another member of management outside your team who you've worked with. Say if you collaborated with their executive assistant and your team lead, their executive assistant, and that team lead, and you work on a project together to get, say, new laptops ordered for your entire team, and make sure that they have high, T1, dedicated lines at their house for security purposes, or VPNs, or whatever that process was. You want to have that person who is highly recognized, if possible, and someone who is well respected to be on that review panel for you. And I encourage this especially in sales organizations, if you are allowed to request a client testimonial, a customer testimonial, a customer of your company, of your company's product that you have worked with directly, or maybe on their board that you have worked with directly to help resolve any kind of problems or just any project you have done with them, and they are outside your organization, but a customer, a client, and they will allow you to ask that person to be on your review team, you want to do so. Now, here's the most important part of this 360 review, is when you've thought about all the people that you would like to be, you may not get to select all of them, right? Remember, this is usually 2 to 3 people within the organization, 1 or 2 managers, including your own, and then, if feasible, a client or customer outside. And you want to make sure that the people that you are intending to ask to be part of this process, and you may not have time this year. They may have already rolled this out like, bam, bam, we got to do this now. You want to make sure you have, give them a heads up. Especially with somebody you're not like, they're really great and I worked with them, but I didn't work with them for a long time. It was just this one-off project, but they have a lot of pull and they have a lot of input with my team lead and my executives. Then by all means, reach out to them and say, by the way, my organization is moving, we're moving to this 360, as you know, and I would really appreciate and respect if you could be part of my evaluation, because your feedback is important, because feedback is to help growth and build where we need to grow at. It's not all like rah-rah, you have figured it all out. Annual reviews are not about just, congratulatory, you've made it through this year and you haven't screwed up. I mean, that's not what they're supposed to be about. Ideally, they're supposed to say, here are the things that you've accomplished this year, and here's how we would like you to take those skills and challenge yourself to do these next things over the next year. That's the ideal purpose of a performance review. Does it happen that way? I don't know. In my experience, I've had the range of totally perfunctory, where it was like just checkbox, and then Kemetia meets the minimum standard of executive support. She has great rapport with people and get the standard, whatever the baseline pay change is. No title change, no recognition, no rah-rah. It's just very perfunctory. Like, I have to do this, I'm not really interested in it, and it's a waste of my time, and I'm just going to do it. Whereas if you have a 360, you have an opportunity to bring in more points of view about the work. And your supervisors are going to appreciate that because they're not having that face-to-face time with you as they may have been in an office environment. And certainly our requirements for skills have changed in terms of not skills, but the type of work we're being asked to do has changed. We're doing push a lot towards more digital, online. This has been coming and has been happening for some time, but there's a large portion of our peer group that is just now beginning to address this in terms of live streaming and Zoom and conferencing and video conferencing and recording and editing video, all of those things. Our supervisors are glad to have an opportunity to get other points of view in because they don't have the time necessarily or have had the opportunity to work and see that conversation that you tend to have if you're in an office with your team. It's a little more social, it's a little more informative. The body language, you're right in front of somebody because you can tell. All of those things are so important. So when it comes time to evaluating how you're working with folks, this is going to be key. It's a lot, right? So what happens when an organization is under duress? So there's this last piece of annual review and what may happen with COVID is not meant to be frightening or scaremonger, but it's important to think, and you're probably well aware of this, if your industry, the organization you work for, the industry they work for is in trouble. Like meetings and events industry is first and foremost. So many of us have seen this firsthand with either colleagues or events we planned. I know the event I planned for IAAP Seacoast here in the Portsmouth, New Hampshire region, it was postponed a whole year because we knew we weren't going to be able to get our speakers here, and we knew that there were too many unknowns to do it properly. Now we face, okay, we're rolling into the last half of 2020, last quarter. We can't predict how things will change for the spring, but I think it's fairly safe to say that you have to plan for people not being able to travel, especially overseas. So if you had a conference scheduled for overseas and most of your team is coming from the United States to go to another country, right now, we're pretty much not allowed to visit most countries for business or for pleasure due to the high levels of coronavirus in our country. So that may not change anytime soon. If you are somebody who works in the healthcare industry, the healthcare systems, if you're working for a hospital system or first responders, I am so certain that the stress of this year has been enormous. And I can hope that you are doing things for self-care. And that should be part of your ask. If you have a review, if they have time for a review, if they have a conversation about what are the things that you need to do your job well and do it better, I hope that you will consider putting in a request for additional time off. Or if you need to modify your schedule. Or if they have an answer as to whether or not you're going to be back in the office full time. If you have an opportunity to ask, what works for you? Have that conversation. You're going to know the timing. You're going to know your guys, gals that you work for. You're going to know when to do these things. Again, we're not going to ask them this at a bad time, like right after they come off a board call. You're going to schedule it appropriately. You're going to say, can we get together and talk? I have a few questions. I don't really want to put them in an email. I'd rather just have some time with you face-to-face on Zoom or Teams or whichever tool you're using. And last but not least, how could annual reviews change? And I'd be curious to hear from our colleagues, our peers. If you've always done your review with your organization because you're in one location and your team lead is in another, this way, by video conference, was it recorded? I'm curious. I want to know, right? Are they going to be recorded? That is a legit question to ask either HR or your team lead, because so many things are recorded. They set it, it's recorded automatically. And what are the legal ramifications for that? And smaller organizations, may not have this ginormous general counsel team to guide them on these sorts of HR issues. So you want to make sure you ask that question, because is there a reason why you would want it to not be recorded? Or is there a reason you would want it to be recorded? And your HR crowd may already have a policy on this, and you just may not know it because it's not widely broadcasted to you or others. So it's a lot to take in, but it's not to be scary. And it's not to be, worrywart, but it is to be thought-provoking. And I hope that when you have an opportunity to take a few minutes after this admin chat and the notes that you make during this, and go back to whomever you feel is the appropriate person to have this conversation with, and when you feel it's an appropriate time to have that conversation about annual reviews. Are you going to be measured on the same target goals that were initially established in January? Are you going to be measured on the initial target goals set back in January? Or is there going to be leeway and understanding that everything is a target and everything is moving? So now I will not have, you will know what you're going to be measured against, if you're going to be actually measured for a review this year, or if it's going to change. If that communication is not very clear with your immediate team leader, I don't encourage you to contact another colleague for their opinion. That can make things very murky, and their team may do things differently, right? Some organizations, some teams operate on a totally different set of rules for whatever reason. It's just corporate America. It's just how it is. So you want to make sure you go through the proper channels, and you can go to the HR contact, or the next professional development person, if you guys still have them in your organization. Just be aware that they're going to be under duress, just like you are, and provide them with the flexibility and patience that you're hoping to get while we're all making these big changes. And I'll close out with this. One of the things that I will miss the most about my annual review with my former supervisor and my team was that after all the reviews were done for everyone. And all the letters and changes in titles and all that stuff had been signed off, and it was really that time of year between the end of a calendar year and then that break for the holiday before the new year began. We would have just a team outing for lunch. We would have just, the group, the team of us out for a lunch and just hang out and have lunch. No work talk. And it was one of the ways we built respect and understanding between us. And I think that's one of the pieces that we're missing right now with moving to an all online work environment. It's very hard. Even with online happy hours, it's incredibly tough to have that same atmosphere. But we do the best we can for our teams. And I'll close out with this. I hope you have a very successful and serene end to your calendar work year. That you were able to get clarity from your HR team or your immediate management partner on how people are being evaluated, if they're not being evaluated, and what are your target goals and have they changed. And please, re-clarify or re-dictate what the priority is. And if it's always going to be moving, that's fine. I can't be measured against something that's constantly moving, correct? Right? So the 3 ways we talk about the pandemic altering annual performance reviews: timelines, the criteria you're being measured against, the format that you're being measured on. Yeah, so keep those in mind when you are taking notes today. If you need to follow up with me, you can reach me on my blog, adminrenegade.com. The email for that is info@adminrenegade.com, so you can email me there. You can comment on Twitter. I haven't been blogging as much, but I still monitor my blog. I think all of us are having trouble finding time for extracurriculars during the pandemic. Take care. Please take care of yourself. Remember, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Keep safe distance. And be cool. Thanks, guys.